Share screen. Good job this week too, by the way, Alex. I think it's really great that you're following through with it, and keeping up week to week on top of everything else that you're trying to do. So
yeah, it's nice to actually have the like a goal to work towards, and having an actual deadline really for me is really helpful.
have you done an online type class before? Have you? I don't remember.
Not in digital art. The only online I've done the Love Life drawing.
Yeah, I
That
remember that.
that
Yeah.
was that was like over a year ago now. I did that, and
Man, isn't
then
that wild?
I think September of last year, so not too long ago, I did one of the Watts Academy um head drawing
Mm-hmm.
anatomy course. Yeah. So yeah, just two 5-week courses, but I haven't actually taken any proper online courses, other online courses where you get any feedback.
I see. Well, cool. So then this is like a precursor.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey. Are you
Hello.
late?
No, I've
Oh.
just started. I've waited for you guys, so I have some people to bounce off of.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So we're good to get started. I'm streaming, sharing screens. Okay, so this week's lesson is going to be on interior cutaway design. And let's write
Cool.
that down. Interior cutaway. Interior cutaways are often used in game design, but they can be used in visual development and film as well. And I pulled up some notes from one of Feng Zhu's videos. It's a recent one in the 100 series, where he goes over some great tips. And a lot of what we go over is going to be reiterating those because they're pretty universal. But just so we have an idea of where we're headed today, the idea of an interior cutaway is to provide the information for a space. And so we want to know, is a space is not exciting without methods of storytelling. So when we design something, we want to create a brief and then use that brief to inform us for how to fill a space, make it interesting, and design it in a way that immediately tells a viewer um, the type of mood or encounter or scene that they should be expecting from it. Okay. I'm not going to pull them. Maybe I won't pull them up right now, but there are some excellent examples. I'll pull them up. Why should I? I shouldn't just say it. Ratatouille. I'll call him a villain, but this is a really good example in Ratatouille of a set design where his entire room looks like a coffin, a vampire's coffin. But of course, I can't find it. Maybe I can blame it on Bing, though. I'll try one more time before I go back. And maybe if I type in the word coffin. Yeah, here we go. So while this is a pretty extreme point of view, because it's animation and everything is intentionally made to give the quickest read possible, we can see how he is essentially the death dealer to restaurants. So his room is a coffin. His desk looks like an organ. It evokes the feeling of a vampire, someone who unnaturally stays up and is out to get you. That is a prime example of good storytelling. In Feng Zhu's examples, he's talking primarily from game design, of which he would label things that are making for an interesting player space, so you create interesting geometry, and then you fill that set with things that can create sound, animation, and interactable objects. So these will all be really good things to think about as we talk more. But for now, I'm going to go into the basics of setting up a cutaway. So what we can do to easily get going, because we don't want to finagle with room designs just in perspective, we could, but this may not be as accurate as you want it to be. Perhaps you have the idea for a sarcophagus or a coffin, whichever is the right word. It's much easier to take that shape, and then warp it into perspective. And we can use this method constantly.
So would you set up a perspective grid, or do you just prefer it freehand like this?
Once I have found a position for it, that's when I would go in and create a perfect grid. So now that I have found a layout, I would come in here and mess with it. If you have perspective tools on Photoshop, you can just trace the lines and instantly find the grid that you need. So that's pretty handy.
See, this is what confuses me a tiny bit, because a lot of these things are more isometric, right? So in which case, what kind of perspective or horizon line does an isometric drawing have?
An isometric drawing is defined by having zero convergence. So if I can get a hold of my life and find the horizon line. Typical perspective is defined by convergence. You can draw a box within this shape, and it's going to fit within the established scene, even if it's rotated like that. If I come up here, we can check it out with Procreate, where there is zero convergence. This is basically just a grid, but turned to an angle. And when you draw on this, everything is a perfect shape. Now, I think it may look isometric because of the nature of shoebox design, but typically I think in these game design cutaways that you see on ArtStation, they're in natural perspective still. They may just be using a 3D model so they can change the lens degree and the field of view in order to get something that is either really wide or a little flatter. And because the problem that arises with isometric when you're creating something architectural is you can't get symmetry that makes sense. So say I have this over here and I want to mirror this building, so I'm going to draw through and just get an idea of where that might be. If I come out here, it'll sit there in space, but then as we go further, it's gonna start to look funky and strange, and it causes issues. I'm not that experienced with isometric. I'm sure there are workarounds, or it's just part of the look. But let's see. One of the ways that you can work efficiently with this this orthographic to perspective method is you can create a layout, and you can even something complex like circles, which would be it would be a huge pain normally, right? Let's say that you want a stairwell, and then there is a platform where a king's chair would sit here with a thinner one, and then they're lined by that. So it's a big chamber that the player walks into, and this is, I don't know, just a platform for them to talk to the king. If you warped this into perspective, we can start like this. And I might push it over to the right some. Bring the angle down a little bit so we can get a good view. You can mess with this. You can duplicate, cut, and you can push geometry. That's a really cool part. So I'm going to cut and paste this out. And I'm going to raise it. In fact, let's copy it first. I'm going to raise it up. And then this one, I'm going to distort up. Sorry if you can hear my dogs. They're going crazy for some reason. Okay, good. So then you just erase out any overlapping elements and draw back in. And now you have a complex circular environment that, you didn't have to figure out the correct perspective for the ellipses. As you go higher, you might, you'll want to flatten things out some, of course, to meet your horizon line. But then you can play with this and have some sort of chandelier maybe. And then you get an interesting room shape. You might draw this one down lower just to keep the field of view in here. Draw a person, draw a chair. And there is a room. So before I get any further, I'll just show some examples from past things that I've done. Let's see. Using this method, you can get pretty complex layouts that will mirror the accuracy of a 3D model. Oh, on YouTube, Samir is asking if the live chat is working. Yeah, you can chat, and if I pay attention, I will catch your comments. But here are examples of where I took layouts and I raised them up and I positioned them. It's a little laborious, but you get really accurate layouts for you to then draw on. And this is as close as you can get to working in 3D without having to know any modeling skills. So drawing all of those pillars would be much more obnoxious. This is going to be... Go ahead.
Where's the perspective lines? These views always confuse me. Like, where's the grid? Like, in the lines? Like, oh, okay, I see. So it's a 3-point perspective then.
Yes. I just didn't have it turned on because when Procreate is in gallery mode, it doesn't display the perspective lines. But for each one of these, I did have to go in and retroactively find the perspective. I did it even here. Even with a circular environment, it can still adhere to a perspective. Like if you're trying to follow a path like this one, then you can still define that. And so always a good idea, if not necessary, to do so. And then some small ones like this. So let me go grab a thing that I have done for planning for our demo. And I'll take a screenshot. Okay. I'm in the wrong image. We'll go over some principles of a layout first before we start just detailing and demoing out. When I've talked to modern day James about set design or room design, there are some key principles that we want to keep in mind. So say that we have a market interior, or like if you're playing Bloodborne, maybe it's a spooky room that you're trying to get through, and you have a labyrinth of doors. You come in a main entrance, and you can go here, and you can go here, and you want to be able to guide the player who is going to be experiencing this in first person or third person, and you want to make sure that this room isn't boring and is curated to their experiences. One thing that you want to do compositionally is to always block off corners. We don't want to provide a reason for players to get trapped or too distracted unless you have a secret for them and that sort of thing. So this is the same sort of principle as working in a canvas, and when you have a focal point on the rule of thirds, you don't want to have the viewer have their eye led down that direction. This is bad. So what you would do is, by filling that space up with things that can lead and flow and block off and obstruct in certain ways, so that you can essentially frame the viewer's eye. you can do the same thing three-dimensionally. And that would be stuff like using your set in order to create things that naturally block stuff off. So let's say this is a bunch of barrels. A big
How
one.
often in industry do people draw this from scratch now when there's 3D software? Like, would you say most people use 3D first these days for stuff like this?
I would say no, because everyone that I have asked, at least at Brainstorm, who have worked under James Peck, Kaysen, and Kenny Vo, do a lot of line drawings, and both of them are very unskilled with 3D, and they produce, like 5 pieces of work a day, 5 concepts or sketches. I have asked them because it seems like 3D is the solution for interiors at this point. It's helpful, but it's not necessary. And
it's more like a shortcut, almost.
Yeah. And, with 3D, like anything, it has its trade-offs where 3D is going to take time. And whereas sketching, if you get comfortable and fast with this can be no time at all, and you can try different layouts. You can just come in here and say, I want this, and I want to have like a big feature here. Maybe this is like a broken statue with a hand and a bunch of rubble, and this is going to have something interesting with some sort of pedestal here, or that could be like a save point, and then we're going to wall off. Like, so you can work so much quicker, is the idea with sketching these things out. Of course, once you get your idea, it may be it would be a good practice probably to work in 3D. That way you can zoom in, the space that you create can then actually be used for a keyframe. So for efficiency's sake, if you go ahead and make the set, you can then reuse that in multiple instances. But the idea of working loose and fast is that you can pump these out in 5 minutes or less and get a lot of vastly different ideas. Like stretching out a room and filling that with its own layout and having its own special way to navigate and that sort of player idea. You can get this off to a supervisor or something and have that approval, that idea process much faster. And let's pull up Fangzhu's notes. Let's see. I'll upload them to a channel. This way you guys can have them too, because I'm going to be referring to them. Okay. That is so small. Well, I don't know if anyone can read that on stream, but at least you have the actual image. Okay, so step 1, let's start over. If we have a basic box, I'm regurgitating Fangzhu's ideas because they're the same stuff that Kaysen taught us. It's really universal. These are the principles of good design, so we'll just be going over it again. Is we want to get away from a box. Square is just boring. We want to make that more interesting. If it helps, we can go orthographic and create an interesting design that way. If you want to have a hallway or a grand cathedral, maybe you've got your big hall with your rows of seats. I'll bring that in because that seems pretty wide. We want a rug that passes through it. And then you want some stairs. And maybe it's lined by columns. This can then We'll even give it a break. So maybe this is a really long hallway. And it can separate into other halls. So now this is like some sort of, well, I don't know exactly what the space might be, but it would be interesting, right? So this now is a massive space. We can pull this into perspective. Make sure that when you distort, you're accounting for convergence. That's what'll get things to look natural. Shrink it down. And then you can extrude upwards. So now we've started with an interesting space. Maybe we've got windows, and these are columns. This is a wall. Okay. Principles of good design in a space. First one was to make the space more interesting, which we did. The second is to add verticality, or at least break up the space with X, Y, and Z dimensions, which is what we did by extruding upwards with columns and having a stairway that leads up. These would all be seats. And if we wanted to get interesting, we might come down in this space. So maybe this is actually an entrance in a different hall. And so now it's this big vertical ascension, right? A pedestal. Then next step after that, I can't read it, I'll find what I had written down. Exploration is next. So, what is exploration? Exploration is providing the opportunity for the player or a viewer to look somewhere that isn't just the immediate space that they're in. And that can be the windows, and maybe this is broken glass. It used to be a nice stained glass thing, but it's all broken. And you can see outside of it with trees and that sort of thing, like it's overgrown. Maybe this is a set for The Last of Us, but for whatever reason you are in a cathedral and it's got like overgrown trees and vines coming in, working their way up. So that's, you know, abandoned is always a very easy storytelling method. This is exploration. So let's start color coding these with red. So with exploration, you have other hallways that you can go down. You have windows that you can look in. In other instances, it might be nooks and crannies, little corners that aren't necessarily corners, but you use good principles of design to guide the eye into somewhere that you can then circle back on, that sort of thing. Okay. Let's change color. Next would be sound design. This one was unique to Fang's advice. I found it interesting. This is purely from a game component, where you are designing and adding things to the set that would produce sound when you walk by them or walk near them. So this would be something like maybe on this floor you have a carpet, and that carpet is soft, so your footsteps are muted. But then when you change to tile, it might echo. So the rest would be tile here. And maybe it's got an interesting circle pattern, who knows. You might think of other things like chimes or open windows, so air, uh, the breeze. Anything that can create sound and fill a space with unique and what is the word? Not. It starts with an N, just new. But after that, we'd go with practical lights. That color didn't change enough. Practical lights are going to be things like torches.
You can also use lights to guide the player, right? To the objective.
Yes, and in this case, if we went into grayscale, that window, that broken window, would probably be the primary component that we would use. So if this was all shrouded in darkness, you would then guide the player to that point, but along the way you can have smaller points of interest. That's not bright enough. Or just practical lighting that assigns glow and ambience to the space. But you would know in the interior that the place that you want to go is at the end of the hallway, both with the way that it's laid out because it feels important and it's leading you straight down the line. It has a different goal than a winding room. And two, because the primary light source is going to be this place with all of this interesting stuff and of course some sort of point of interest like a weapon or a boss, that sort of thing. So practical lights. Then after that would be animation, things that animate. And what would things like that be? That can be stuff like curtains, plants, animals. If it, instead of it being abandoned in a more casual setting, it'd be something like birds flying past a window.
You can have birds in abandoned locations.
Yeah, absolutely. Cats, dogs might be in a house, you know, that sort of thing. You might fill that in, and you might add that to a set just because. But let's say now we add curtains. So this used to be, you've got some curtains here that wave in the wind. They're tattered. I know none of this is clear, but it's more about the principles of what we're going over before we try to tighten this up. And the last would be storytelling. Storytelling is stuff that leaves clues of a lived-in space. Often it's playing with time, you know. What happened over time that allows you to see the story of whoever lived there before. And so in this case, it might be that we have, you know, brought down a whole pillar, and if we were to design this out, maybe the wall would be broken. And now this entire side is walled off, rebar, and junk stuff. You can't go this way because something bad happened. Along with that, we've got all this broken and spiky stuff, and maybe on the walls there could be, if these were like fanatics or something, maybe they have some sort of graphics on this that, you know, it's like a torch and a hand holding that said torch, and it's got graffiti that says like, only this is the real way, that sort of thing, in a dystopian society. stuff that leaves clues for the player to explore and read. Uncharted is an excellent example. You can go into an old tomb and you can piece together what that civilization used to do, or maybe there's an old junkyard with ships, or you're in a house, you're in Nathan Drake's house, and you can see what their interests are and where they sit normally, and their layout from their kitchen to their room, and how they usually live their routine. All of these principles come together to create a complete idea. So it's not enough to just have just set dressing. So like if you, I'll just say, I won't draw it, but set dressing, which is furniture and geometry. This is not enough. What we want is storytelling. So if you're in a bedroom of a person, we want to know, like, what's their job? Family? Are there any stressors? Like, does a family member have cancer, and does that put a stress on them? Is that a reason why they have to work? If they, maybe uncle has cancer, and you'd have a picture that also would show us that the person is close to their uncle. Maybe they have to work a job, but they're always late. So you might throw in like a calendar that always has the times scratched off, you know, and a new time put in. So you might say like 9 a.m. on the calendar, cross it off 11, and say, sorry, boss. You might show that the bed is a huge mess, and their food was a bunch of ramen packets and microwavable stuff that they can eat quickly. That sort of thing. If you just fill it in with candles, lamps, blankets, that sort of thing, it's not enough to make an interesting space. You have to think about who, what, and where. Principles of good writing. Okay. So let's see. I had this idea, and we're going to try to play it up and make it more interesting, right? We're going to zoom out and improve this in a way that we just talked about for the remainder of the demo. Now, maybe I'll just pull it up as a reference. Okay, so when thinking through, we want to come up with a design brief. Always important to work towards designs. And Ellie, if you have to go sit with Antonio, that's fine. So.
Yeah, I do. But this has been really good. If you record this, I'll love to watch it through or something.
Yeah, it's all on YouTube. All the previous lessons, and they'll all be up in I'll edit them down for the future and release it as one big course later on. So yeah, this is all basically information that I've taken on and that I'm using in my day-to-day job. So yeah.
Well, it's very informative, so thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm glad it's helpful. Thanks for sitting in.
No worries. See you later, man. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. So a design brief. When thinking about what we want to create restrictions. We don't want to work in a vacuum, of course. And establish who, what, where, and most importantly, why. In my case, it is a fantasy, a Disney-esque fantasy story. Set in medieval Slavic country. The what is a tower. Princess is stuck in a tower. That's a very easy idea. Tower, locked up. Let's see. Tower, room, living space. This is about Vasilisa, princess. And now we can start diving into what these things are. The why? Princess locked by her father. To keep safe from being abducted. Vasilisa needs an identity. She needs personality. So let's say that she is overwhelmingly cute, right? She hasn't grown up in any sort of hardship, and all she's known is her tower. However, she has had a lot of time on her hands, right? So maybe lots of time. She has lots of hobbies. She's educated. She's crafty. She makes things. Let's say that I don't know, what would be something interesting? She has decided that she likes to make dresses because that's what she's used to. But she starts experimenting with making more practical clothing. She wants to get a sense of the world around her. Worldly stuff that she experiences in her books that she reads. And with this space, we want to feel that it's cute and welcoming, like it's a home. But at the same time, we want to be able to try and convey that this is also a trap. It's a cage. And to people on YouTube, hello. I see, sorry, I see quite a few comments. I've been busy writing. All right. So knowing this as a prompt, we can start thinking about her living space. if we were going to go in a 3/4 and we wanted this to be a descriptive room, maybe we want to have what would be all the necessities of a full living space. She needs a place to sleep. She needs a kitchen. She needs a restroom. Place to wash clothes. And knowing that she is a princess and she has interests, she would probably have an area set up that would be like a reading nook and a crafts center. That sort of thing. A place where she does her stuff. So, we can think about that in our layout. I'm not going to design all of it. It'll be suggested, and then we'll have a focal point of like her room, that sort of idea. But let's think through having a room space. We'll start off with a square and then think how would this become more interesting. So, if this is in a tower, right? We can think about this being in a circle, and she's at the top. Maybe her room is on this side. So already that allows for us to curve it. I'm going to want to break this geometry, so maybe if she feels like she's trapped and we want to play that up for people to be communicated that idea, there's only going to be a tiny, small window, and it's gated off. She may have a bed, and I'm going off of my room that I had up here originally. It could be, if we, depending on how we set up the perspective, we'll have a bed here. Shrink this window down considerably. Then she's going to have her reading nook. I'm wondering if going diagonal would be interesting for the space, or if it would make more sense for her to have more books along the wall. Her craft space would be a large desk. There we go. We'd break that up. Okay. Then this needs to come off and separate to a larger living space. She needs to be able to have a kitchen. She needs to have some sort of space. Comes off like this. Maybe there is a... This is where she cooks, and there's a furnace. Attached here would be where she washes. And the bathroom, easy access. We'll make it larger so that we can fit a tub. And let's go with that. Let's see how we can expand this, warp this to fit a tower idea. So maybe if I copy this, and try this out again. What I'm thinking of doing is, having this interact with the idea of the tower more. If I'm thinking about the verticality idea, maybe we have stairs, so we would introduce stairs that go down, and this would be a trapdoor that would go down later in the tower, and all of this is blocked off. So maybe she actually has, there would be doors, but those doors have big locks on them, right? So cannot access. Then she only has one window out this way and one window above the kitchen or the sink. I'm thinking maybe instead of it being a door, it could be more of like a hall, and she's retrofitted it with drapes. But that's in perspective, so I'll get rid of that. In between these two, she's got a rug, she's got another rug, and this would be all tile. Cobblestone would be interesting too, if we... So instead of it being super homey, like this is a tower, we're gonna think of towery-ish materials. And let's stretch this along that line. Okay, so there's our layout idea that we're going to mess around with. And good, I've got it isolated. And I wanted to sort this into perspective. I'm going to have this good sense of looking down, so I want to raise this rather than having it with a more see how if we have it this way, it's going to be as if we're looking and walls would stop us. We want to be able to look down into the space, so I'm going to have the convergence go to a horizon line that is much higher up. I'm also going to keep convergence minimal. It'll make sense, but I also don't want to have it get too crazy, so we'll go with this. And let's find a decent perspective vanishing point for us to use. So I'm keeping in mind that I am using a curved space primarily, so this isn't going to be picture perfect for what we need. But I can at least find some areas that line up. Like where the room breaks could be a decent anchor for me to hit. And now everything that I draw is going to adhere to this layout. And of course, the most important part is emulating the look of looking down. The higher that horizon line is off of the canvas, the more we might converge, and the more it's going to emulate looking down. If we were looking straight down, this third vanishing point would be in the center. However, we're not looking straight down. We're looking a little bit more, so now we're essentially moving our camera and tilting it upwards. The more and more it comes down. And I think that's a decent level of convergence for this. So I've got this grid, and I'm going to work on top of it. All right. We want a living space, so I'm going to start building up our space. I did think about how verticality would also be more interesting. Maybe the bedroom. We continue this spiral idea. So what I'm doing here is expanding it and moving it upwards so that I can connect this space down. That was entirely too high given the scale. Let's try again. Yeah, okay, that's better. That's enough. So if we have a door here, we want to be able to show that this is stairs. And then that leads to her room. So right now I'm just cleaning up what we have. Let's implement our verticality wherever we can before we start diving deeper. This stairwell needs to be down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the rest of the room essentially cut it off, but it'll still be slightly visible. Doing stairs can also be hard, but we'll get it. I'm trying to think about how this would work. This will be like a little door, you can just see it there. Okay, and then this is wall. We'll help convey that by adding verticals. All right, let's keep going. So it's a vertical space, it's an unconventional layout, and now we're going to be extruding upwards and finding our major components. I wanted a table in this area. I need to get on the proper layer. Then we said this was a washroom, so I don't think that there's going to be a proper doorway for this. Also, if you need to find height, you can kind of come up in other directions and allow yourself to find that sort of height area. You might do this on a separate layer, but since I found that the height is around here, that's where I'm going to cap off my doorway for it. And I think making this more of like a nook, maybe a little cubby, would make that interesting. I'm going to start the wall here. So all I'm doing here to maintain my perspective is to follow the, sorry that Procreate is going crazy, is just following the original layout. As long as you keep that relatively similar, you'll be okay. This wall gets raised, so I'll just bring it up again. And now we're back in perspective, so I can gonna take this line, at least in Procreate. Another good idea would be to double your line, just copy it, and then shrink it vertically some so that it follows the new convergence of being higher up. You'll find, let's see, let's try that. Not everyone has Procreate, so I'll do it. Okay, I'm going to copy this line, and I'm going to shift it upwards. I'm shifting it up to the right some because it needs to follow 3-point and how it expands outward, essentially. And it needs to become larger. But in order to fit, we need to shrink it out some and expand this way. The same thing that is happening here is how when we have an ellipse in perspective, and as we approach a horizon line, that ellipse is going to get thinner. That curve that was down here is now more like this. So now when we follow that, our perspective line comes down perfectly to the original room. Okay. I'll have a shallow wall here so that we can still see the tub. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll copy this line. And I'll shift it up to that point. And I'm not going to bother with messing with the convergence of this one too much because it moved so little. Okay, so we are in our room. Some stuff that I'm going to do is get that layout going, get the three-dimensionality to play in some. So I'm going to thicken these walls. Looks like I got my wall in the wrong place. So I will move this one over. Actually, I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. We'll have to resolve that area later. Okay. If you guys in the chat have any ideas of how you'd like to see me progress this, or anything that you want to see in particular, I am more than open. But for now, I'll just quickly indicate things. We'd be here for ages if I tried to make this tight, so. Alright, so in what I had originally done was have a sort of double-decker couch, or double-decker bed. Her bed can be yay tall. It's gonna have some bubbly things, because she is nice and sweet, and pillows. We'll have a lot of pillows, circular type pillows, because we want to convey the sense that she's cute, she has things that she likes. Alright, bed. This window is interesting, so maybe it's a small window, but it actually extrudes outward some. It would come up here, but I'm not drawing that part since I believe the frame would cut it off. And I'll draw the posts. She is not allowed out. Okay. Here we can have a large rug. Figured a circle rug would be nice for the area, since she is, nice. We're using shape language that is helping convey her character. I'm going to set up this door like I had mentioned earlier. And how can we convey? It's locked. Maybe it's gated off. We use that similar language. It's silly and it's over the top, but we want to get the point across. She's not allowed in that door. Let's see. There's our rug. And then she has bookshelves that line this wall. The way to figure this out in perspective is to, one, follow the curve, and mine do not follow the curve strongly enough, because the one that is closest to camera feels really tall. If it's absolutely necessary, you can always refer to your horizon line, imagine it, figure out the rotation, but I'm going to be using the curves that we have as a basis. And I can take this back one down to where it would be close to the wall, and that is where the bottom of this bookshelf is. make sure to draw on a new layer for the next stuff. Okay, so what is interesting about these bookshelves? One, we might have some design to them. Add some roundish design. This would be excellent for an asset to create, like we've gone over in previous weeks. But let's add shelves. Preferably in perspective. Samir on YouTube is asking if I'm an interior designer. No, not by trade. But I do design interiors for entertainment art. And you can too. It's the magic of learning these ideas. On these shelves, I think it'd be fun to have a bunch of books and stacks of books. There's things that are falling off. She's got stuff that comes up here. She's got all these books that shouldn't be on the floor, but they are because she reads them and she tosses them. She gets bored. We fill this up. Maybe she's got some keepsakes here, some trinkets that she enjoys. Something like a teddy bear could be hiding away. And imagine that that is all filled up. Next, we would want, I'm going to lift this up. I'll talk about transition points that we've gone over in previous lessons. And that's things like we want to avoid this harsh 90-degree angle between floor and wall. And a lot of the time in old fantasy interior design that you can see really played up in things like World of Warcraft is there will be a baseboard, and then there's usually another one. And in between here is cobblestone. A good way to manage cobblestone is to start with your major shapes, and then you can pick away smaller ones in the corners. Alright, so we know that that is cobblestone. I'm going to follow that line over here so that I know that it's generally in this area to stay in perspective. This is another wooden board, and then I'll draw some squiggles. So that's cobblestone. And she might have things like shelves. I want to lead. I'm going to keep in mind my compositional principles that we've talked about in previous lessons. I want that window to be interesting, so if I have shelves, I want the shelves to come up some. And maybe below here she's got like paintings or... But this is kind of like a stepstone mechanic that is creating a winding line going down to that window, or at least I hope it would be. On it would be more stuff that you have to fill though, so just keep that in mind. Okay. And other things, we've talked about storytelling. So we have our set dressing but that's not enough. We want her to feel like she is trapped. So we have this desk here, and maybe there is a sewing machine on it. Maybe we're gonna play with the time a little bit. I know we said this is medieval. If I had time to figure out how they created linens at the time, then maybe I would do that. But I'll have this dress set up. It's on a post, but on the maybe there's two of them, and on the second one it's an adventurer's outfit, right? So it's got straps and it's got pouches because she's planning ways to escape. It's got a bag. So there you might say, oh, well, she's a princess, but she's also got some rougher edges and she's exploring opportunities. Maybe she is, I don't know, working on constructing pouches, a shield. I don't really know. You know, this is all just brainstorming and creating ideas. You leave these around. Maybe you draw them. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. But at the very least, you can always take it out. And this is another cubby with some, like maybe this would be filled with belongings that she uses for her crafts. She's got some spool lined up. And tape is just strewn about. And we're going to have a chair, a sitting chair. This is her reading chair. So she sits here. She's got a lot of books again. I want to show off this asset that I made when I was working on finishing out last week's demo. Made these stylized books. These are fun. Whoops. They're really large for the scene. They might shrink down to the point that they're unusable because it distorts, but let's try. What I'm doing here is taking these stacks and I'm distorting them into a perspective that works. I may even just leave them as is so that there's some rotation. And then I can come in here and I will tighten up these lines and extrude out their geometry. This is the more boring process of doing stuff like this. Sorry if I'm forgetting to talk. Okay. So what you can start doing with this is with objects that are in front of other things. Personally, I wouldn't want to get rid of the hard work that we've done in case the stuff that we put down is not to our liking. So I'm going to mask out the layer underneath so that we can get rid of those overlaps. But at the same time, if we ever need to return to it, or we need to edit it for whatever reason, we can. Alright, so there's a bunch of books. She's got books everywhere. You get it yet? Okay. Maybe, I don't know how we would indicate it, but maybe this looks like it's been broken in and she's got tools that has been shown. A hammer, but they'd have to be makeshift, right? Or maybe she's asked for tools. I don't know. It could be justified. She's got tools and she's been trying to get in. A bunch of lock picks and things like that just strewn about. And then maybe on her calendar, she's got a calendar here. And she's got one page that you can see that has the normal calendar. And on the other one, she's got herself counting all the days, right? So she hides that when people come up, but she's really looking for a way out. All right, so that is a full room, and we can take those ideas and apply them in the future to other things. Stuff like a big dining table with, it'd be funny, just one chair. So it's like this big extravagant table, and it's got all these plates, and it's been set up and it has never been touched. She doesn't use it, with these little stools for keeping things on, and all she has is like a dingy napkin with forks and spoons that are stacked on top of each other and a stack of plates. Because this is where she eats. No one ever touches here at all. And that's like the best way that you could explain it. There's like, chewed apple, plates with dirty stuff on it. That's where she eats. You have to overboard your information like this. It's not enough to just have, oh, well, I think that she could be interested in sports, so I'm going to add a golf club. It's like, if you want people to know that that is part of their personality or that is their daily action, you have to communicate that in a way that the viewer is really going to get it for sure. So when you draw this stuff out, what are you going to do? You're going to make it so that nothing is here. This is where she eats. And all of the concentration, 90% of what you want them to be, is 10% of the entire set. Sorry that you can hear my dogs. Let me go check on them. There's some dog that has gotten out and they're panicking. They're going crazy. Okay, so I'm a couple of things while I was away that I wanted to make sure. I'm not going to get into detailing this entire thing out, but I do want to talk about how to lead VI, or making an attempt to lead VI, at least. So we know that this is the main room of interest. For one thing, I'll probably adjust the entire drawing so this is positioned in a way that isn't thrusting that up in the corner. But two, we want to think about leading lines. How can we get people up to here? Well, I might think about things on the wall, things that are up here that kind of create this rhythm that is leading up to that point. And then I want to block off this corner. There needs to be something here. So this can be either a box, like for now it's a box, but it can become something later, right? We can go look up, do our research, figure out what kind of furniture might show up there. I'm thinking instead of this being a washroom, it's going to be a chimney. And I still want it to be a circular motif, but I'm not going to have it be as tall. So chimneys often have some vertical space to them. Then we got a couple logs. And that requires, fire tools, things that take care of a fire. You'd have a mantelpiece. Maybe on here, these would be images of her father, the king. So here you could have, like, this is the family, right? How about that? That's it. So you got the king. And then you've got the queen. And she would have a softer crown. And then you've got Vasilisa, who has the smallest painting for now, but because she's the young one and she was the daughter, they originally set this up in honor of her, so it's supposed to be a nice space. So now you get to see who her parents are. Then of course you're going to need cabinets, so maybe on this side this would be like a pantry dresser, and there would be food. You would have another one here. And in fact, keeping in mind leading the eye, I don't want to obstruct that, so I'm just going to remove that entirely and have them both live here. Make sure that this door is here and that it's also locked off. And Ja Jaeger on YouTube is saying the sketch turned into the entire story about the character. Every bit of information plays its role. Our reflexive ability of environments and visual analysis is overwhelming. Yeah, like to think about just how much information you could put into a space. Like if you just take a moment to look at the room that you're sitting in right now, what is around there? What is strewn about? I've got a battery here because I change the battery and I don't clean up after myself sometimes. You've got guitars. You've got images of places that I've been to. You've got lamps. You've got other things. I've got a fake plant in the corner to make it feel more lively. So stuff like that, which reminds me, having plants and flowers. Maybe in this area is a bunch of flowers that she's been growing. It's the only place she can grow them because it's the only place with light. Same thing would account for here, which I'm going to draw a window. And, oh yeah, drawing things behind other walls can be confusing. And for one, your approach to it can be either just don't draw the wall, or two, only draw things that need to be there to demonstrate what is there. So you're going to have a hanging window. People are going to understand that there's a window, and then you can see through it, so still draw the rest of your stuff. Make sure this is framed nicely, and then you've got, you know, flowers that are pointing the other direction because they're out of the wall. But here you might even draw vines that are growing outside of her window and they're reaching down the tower. If you want to ground this space a little more, you can extend this down and keep going so that it goes down really far. You can see just how far. Okay, this would be a sink and a washroom, a mirror of course, and an outside tub. No door, no window in the bathroom, so she would definitely need lighting. She'd need candles, the practical lights. Not sure how chandeliers would happen. Maybe there would be a chandelier in this space. You could add it up really high, or it could maybe exist a little bit lower like this. And if you drew it there, you would draw, you know, you would design it, and then it would just have to live there, and you would have to deal with the fact that there is stuff behind it. So maybe you do or do not design that and place it there if the fireplace is more important to you. Let's see. She needs a sink area, she needs cups, she needs buckets. And then along this, there would probably be a rug along the fireplace. We talked about a rug that bridges these two halls. And then, of course, corners are going to be blocked off at any possible point. We want to avoid harsh corners. Okay, so last things, I'm going to finish up this demo. Some of the things that we didn't touch on were sound design. So we do have a fire. We could turn the fire on and then it would be crackling. That makes sound. What are other things that might make sound? Maybe if she has a running sink for whatever time period this is in, maybe the sink is running and there's dirty dishes and she's just left it on. If we think about carpet to wood, we definitely want to indicate that this is all cobblestone. So she does have some rugs, she does have some cobblestone that's different material texture. She's got a placemat here. But the windows aren't open, so that creates some barriers about wind. Other things, she might have, you know, like whatever, what are things that make sound? Chimes, music, an instrument. Yeah, we almost forgot about instruments. Let's put a violin here that she's been learning. It's not I don't want that to necessarily be a core facet of her personality, but just that you can see that she has tried playing before. And if you really wanted to, you could draw her leg up, leg out, one arm over here, and she is bored. I'll draw that trapdoor so it's still visible. these would be stairs. Lots and lots of stairs. Make it even a stronger turnaround. So maybe we don't see the trapdoor anymore, but we do see stairs that go down much faster. Okay. Animation, things that move. That can be plants that she has around, that can be drapes that she's tried putting on her window to decorate it up. The drapes can move, fire moves, and let's say that she doesn't live alone. She does have a cat or a dog, and the dog needs a place to live, so we will put her dog's bed right next to hers. Nah. And put it right next to the fireplace. That's what's going to go in this corner. So dog bed, food bowls, but of course the dog is up here sleeping with her. Looks like a rat. Okay. Storytelling. I think we covered the ideas of storytelling, but I'm not going to get it all in one go. Okay. So how about that? I think that works. You guys who are in chat, you have any questions before I go over homework and other what we would be doing for the week? No? Okay. All right, so the homework is, and let me turn this off. Ten cutaways. Of which you take 3 into a mid-level set dressing finish. And of these 3, you'll pick your favorite, and one is going to be a high-level finish with complete storytelling. All right, so in that process, that means starting orthographic to distort. And we might do something like a room, a hallway. So this would be 1, 2, 3. Let's see, I do have, so that I can just complete this here and show you a good example. This would be a basic layout. And I'm going to export that. So in here, as an example, you have the layout, you've pulled it into perspective, and you've extruded. So the main goal of just doing 10 of these is to work with creating the geometry and having it be accurate. Then the ones where you get to a mid-level finish are going to be adding props and things to a theme. It can be fantasy, it can be normal. And lastly would be a high-level interior. Taking it to color is not necessary. Let me find if I've got a line drawing.
Hey Alex, can I just ask you with that one, did you use 3D at all?
No, it was entirely hand-drawn.
That's not really nice, it's really tight.
Let me find it again. Yeah, this guy. So I didn't talk about it in the demo, but good to mention it now, is that this was all of its detail was handled through assets. Not necessarily the small details,
Okay.
which I did draw. I didn't go through and design every single thing. That's the sort of prop I talked about last week where you would design it on the fly. But things like furniture was designed from a reference. This was not.
Okay.
This was. I had a picture, but I didn't fully design it, you know? So the rug was drawn in perspective, and then I used Liquify to distort it to, you know, just show some interest. So once that moved back into the light, it was a little more interesting to have that break there. Got plants. Again, was trying to break corners, break the 90-degree angles, line those walls. And so there's this one step here that's a little bit of verticality. This room goes out into a nook. So we're exploring all those facets of a good interior. Yeah. You can see here how and if you're uncomfortable with where to put the walls in the foreground, you can definitely find some on ArtStation, or just look here how I didn't even draw it unless it was an object like the fireplace in this direction. Just ignore the need for walls. Okie doke. Now, it would be preferable to take your high-level finish to grayscale. I did color because I was ambitious. it did take a lot to figure it out. That would be more of a painting lesson in the future. Don't mind me just making this presentable. Okay, so you can play around with your theme, but pick 2 themes at the most. and play around with them. 5 and 5. The one you end up with can be the one that you go all in on. And explore, you have to decide if this is going to be for film or for game. Film, both require storytelling, but film is going to have things such as stylization and heavy emphasis on character. Whereas games are going to have an emphasis on player space, interactables, and possible key areas. So this would be stuff like a secret area or a boss encounter. You know how you can always tell where a boss room is just because of the way it's designed to fit gameplay. Or secret area, boss encounter, or a common area. So if you do want to design a playable space, you can do that. Or if you want to do a character feature that's something more like an emphasis on showing where a person is and how they live in it, you can do that. And both require storytelling. All right. Yeah, let's get into the homework, shall we? Or the submissions from previous week. That's not it. Okay. So last week's homework assignment was to do some prop design, experiment with that, and then make essentially cinematic or key interior shots rather than design cutaways. And looks to me like you did that. So let's go over, let me just get a good look at what's going on here, and then we'll think through some of these things. So we've got pots. Cool. We've got, okay, so you did 3 with no reference. And then 3 with a reference. Nice, nice, good. Oh, good, this is excellent. So you wanted to make a piece on your own, so you went in and you planned out a layout first, imagined it as a cutaway, but then positioned your camera so that you could have a compositional thumbnail. That's awesome. You went above and beyond with that, so good job.
Yeah, thanks. I saw something from Monday James, one of his videos on doing that, and I was like,
Yeah.
It's just a natural follow-on from what we've been doing.
Awesome. I do remember that video. I haven't seen it in a while. Cool. All right, so that's the natural progression. I think I just went through it in order, so let's cover that. I'd like to ask you, did you have any sort of style reference where you were going with these, like the way they were approached, or the types of shapes? Or
no, I didn't actually. I probably missed a trick there, to be honest. I was just going on what I could distort.
Okay.
With the Photoshop tools, yeah.
And that's fine too. My feedback then would be, in the future, try to design with some sort of anchor. a um, a goal. So this could be either a style goal, the type of shape. So this might be shape or project quality. So like you wanna make a prop that could fit in Arcane, or you want to make a prop that can fit in 101 Dalmatians, right? Otherwise, if you're not trying to play into shape exaggeration, you would do what's the word? Excuse me. Object of inspiration. This is a word that Mark Castanon uses in his form language class. And that would be taking something like a leaf and having that inspire your teapot. And we didn't cover that, so that one I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna say, you should have done that, because this is not a design class, and this is perfectly valid what you had done. In the future, it may help you have direction, right? Just some direction to go in. But this is still a good exercise to play with and see how you can stretch proportions and then work it into your own unique thing. So I would say that was you followed a successful process here. So like I appreciate that you took some time to study the forms of what you're doing and then messing with it. So this is all the right stuff. You tried squashing it, tried pulling it, and then taking those and trying to say, how can I push this idea, which was more of just general proportion editing, taking something small and making it larger in a different direction, and then saying, how can I take one of those ideas and make it even crazier? So that's successful. That's a good mindset to start going down. The part that I would say, this is more of just a design feedback, is for a teapot. I'm not sure about the practicality of a massive handle like that, right?
Yeah, right.
So I've seen, like with Charles Lynn talking about that in his foundation tutorials, or in my class with Mark Castanon, they do talk about how you can stretch things and you can play with things. Our friend Brian, when he took design for animation, this was more important, is
Okay.
you want to think about the functionality. So of course, function before form rather than form before function. But this applies mostly if you're realistic, right? If you're going for an animated style, you can do form before function. Because who's to say? Maybe this is entirely intentional, and in your project you want it to be impractical, right? Like maybe you've got this kooky mad scientist who's like, hey, you want some tea? And he's holding his arm up above his head to try and pour it for you. Like,
Yeah, it's a bit like that kind of Alice in Wonderland, isn't it?
yes, like that's a really amusing idea. So that the design can be successful for that. So when you design things, it's always for intention. And if you establish what this is for, then it can be successful in a different context. So just because what I'm saying here may apply in one case, that's not necessarily to say that it couldn't apply somewhere else. What I would say is, if we keep these exaggerated proportions, we want to maybe play into the uniformity of the shape language itself, right? So we've got this big circular idea here, even more actually. It's probably like that, and then this kind of loses the idea, right? I would want to see possibly starting with the circle, squashing that circle. And would it be interesting to make that long too, or stubby? Okay, I think going stubbier would even be kind of fun. And then if you were to play with the silhouette a little bit so that it's not just a basic circle, let's either distort it less or add on to it, right? So maybe you add to the geometry by adding this little wiggle that can come out, and then it still feels circular with a little platform for it to sit on. Maybe the platform is real small. And or if we want to try and maintain that shape that you have, so let's see how we can make this work instead of just denying it. And again, I'm not an expert designer, so this is just my take on, like, I don't know if that, I also don't know if it's good or not good. So maybe I would try to use this shape, but think about like blending these two together, blending two simple shapes into one. So maybe so we got that, we erase that. I'm going to front load this some because it looks like if we think about balance a little bit, this might come out. And then, you know what? I think we could even see like the idea of symmetricality. So there's a little bit of, you rein in the idea of the shape. Yeah, okay. And then so there's an idea. It's
Cool. Yeah.
I don't know, you know, this is all very subjective process, so but what I did here was trying to simplify the process back down from complexity to simplification. So that idea here would start with, it comes down to that compositional idea of grouping shapes. So you want to group the shape first. And another tip with design is to have simple versus complex. And that's the idea that you have one side which is going to maintain simplicity, and the other side that has active edges. And you can apply this to a leaf. You can apply this to like a pizza. One side has been chewed. And let's see. You would want to apply that to these sorts of ideas as well. So maybe part of the reason is if you have this, you might simplify this side. Then you can have your active side.
I see, okay.
This side may be simplified. One single curve. And now that statement is clearer because you're editing into a shape rather than creating a amorphous shape. How about that? Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And so I think that may be like one of the key factors that I identified there is in this design, by accident, I did accidentally go in and make a perfect curve of this, which is then adjusted there. But you can also break that by creating balance and symmetry. So, again, not a designer, but I've
Yeah,
taken a
turns out
couple
really well.
classes. And so those are good principles to keep in mind. It always improves. The more you try it, the more you start to juggle all those principles together, and you remember, oh, in this design, I need to keep simple versus complex. And then, oh, in the next design, I need to start using basic shapes. And then you start juggling them on top of one another, and you start naturally approaching appealing design. It's very difficult to find that at first, but once you start breaking down the rules and juggling them, it's going to improve naturally. So cool. Let's keep going, buddy. So 3 by no reference, and it looks to me like you were definitely going for sci-fi industrial. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's just keep. I was reusing the assets from the previous week as well on those
Nice.
first
Cool.
3.
You just discovered one of the benefits of them. If you make
Yeah,
an
right.
asset sheet, you can reuse it in the future. So, same thing that I said to Matthias last week is, I think it'd be fun to introduce some geometry with your asset use, so you can avoid detail density. And let's see. What if I draw that out so this is more of a shadow shape? Yeah? Is this darker?
Okay.
So
Oh,
not
yeah, I
only...
see. So it's like set back into the block itself.
Yes, exactly. So that's going to give us some natural depth and complexity to these shapes. And we'll also break up some of that pattern. You could use, in terms of your own layer management, you could use a mask, and maybe you'd come in on top and you'd draw like another shape that changes. Maybe one is tall for a different kind of box. And so you can, or they've got graphics and panels on them. So then you've got that texture, but rather than this dense detail being the sole design aspect of it, you break it up. So assets are very useful for getting all the information that you need immediately, but we want to make it natural by adding distress, breaking things up, adding some grit and grime, adding some patterns, or variation in pattern would be my advice there. Let's see. If this is a sort of hallway or like a warehouse, I think it'd be fun to introduce lights that are, let's extend them. Those would be lights, and maybe you have light posts, really big light posts.
Oh yeah, nice.
Another one that's here in the foreground, and you can't even see it anymore because it would be larger. So that creates like a nice opportunity for an extra layer of depth there. And I would also think about, if we want an idea of scale, if you don't want to draw a guy, that's fine. But what about if we draw a forklift? Yeah?
Yeah.
And
that
just
works.
fleshing out this space some, so you've got the ability to see. I don't know, that's not in scale at all, but that sort of thing is going to give you a good sense of the size of that area too, and just a little sense of
corner as well, doesn't it?
yes, absolutely. I'm sorry if I'm talking over you. Feel free to chat in. Let's go over this. So Another thing is I want to continue to emphasize the value of dumb sci-fi cables and stuff in a sci-fi environment. Why not, right? Who's to say that you can't have these cables? And it's gonna make it look like functionality. Maybe we have another tube. That way you get repetitive scale. And then we'll lead the eye with more cables, and we'll add some connectors, and we'll pinch them a few times, and they'll sprawl out again. And they're very big. For that, you might need a generator. Yes, so I don't know what a generator even looks like, but there it is. There's one. And then you can flesh that out. So just thinking through like stuff that might be in the scene, so you can go that extra level. That would be the set dressing step. That would be, so you've got your room, and the next part would be dressing the room, and after that you can start introducing your storytelling as well on top. For this one, well, not saying I think I'll just skip it and get in the name of time into other things, but I would like to ask, what was this image?
Yeah, there was just, I was trying to think of a use for that asset, and I thought, well, it kind of looks like it could have like a strip lights or something, or like a bright light in there, and I thought, what needs bright light? It could be like a hydroponics or some kind of plants being grown there.
Okay, well then in that case, like I'll just do this real quick, and maybe only in a couple. But what if you did this idea that so you know, like a common thread that I started learning was repeating a concept. There is value in isolation, and that's commonly used. But if you want to give the sense of the use of a space, it's really important to have it repeat often, so that the person can put two and two together. And what if we have a sort of green room with more plants in it?
Yeah, that's brilliant. That is actually really brilliant. I don't know why. Now you say it, it seems so simple, but yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Because I had all these assets that I've made, and there's no use attached to them. They were just things.
Yeah.
So.
And so you've got a cool shape. Like, it's got a cool repeating polygonal shape to it. It looks nice and sci-fi. And then you can have some sort of crane shape that looks like this is how it moves it to the space that you're looking at right now. And then just introduce some sort of post so we can see that that was a place that you walk up to, and then that's a functional scene. How about
Nice.
that? Oh, one more thing would be, I think if we reversed this right now, in just in terms of leading the eye, it looks like it's coming off page, and the rest of the scene that a character would come up from is not visible. So you would solve that either by extending the canvas, or like here, reversing it.
Okay.
And I'll just fill in this. Oops. And so maybe that's a little too much, but in terms of like the perspective, but in general, you just want that to feel like it's like the eye is coming in from this point rather than off page. Cool. Good job. It's like, for one thing, Alex, is I can absolutely tell progress. This is a step above last week, which is a step above the week before that. And your sketches are, you're getting more done in less time. So it's definitely working. I'm seeing the progress.
Yeah, thanks. It definitely yeah, it takes a lot of energy, but they're worth it, aren't they?
Yeah, takes a lot of energy. Absolutely right. Yeah, look at this. Look at that. That's awesome. Good job. Oh,
Thanks.
sweet, dude. So I see you took the critique to heart. So you've got the extra geometry coming in, playing in with what they have established there. You're getting those panels used. Like, I don't have any complaints. Now you're understanding the principles, and now it's just like with each new drawing that you're doing, you're juggling more. So you're definitely growing. And
Yeah, I
like
still
you,
feel like they're quite kind of tight and clinical at the moment, but I
and
guess
that's perfectly fine. As we encourage gesture and the looseness because that's where we want to get in time, right? But
yeah,
who's to expect for a beginner at environments? I was the same way, to just go in and just be like, oh yeah, it's a room and this is a thing and this is a thing and it all works. And if you just do it
yeah,
again, now it's magically in perspective. No, it does. The learning process can be clinical, and that's okay because
yeah,
the more you do this, the more you're going to be like, I need some boxes there. I get that. I know how to do that. And so that's the goal of doing these so many times, is you start to get that repetition in, and it starts to get annoying, right? You're like, I'm not going to do all this again the second time. So you're going to start problem solving in your head for how to do it faster. And that's where the comfort builds in. As you get more comfortable, you start seeking shortcuts, and then the gesture and the looseness starts to come out. So
yeah.
on YouTube, a couple guys have said hello, as just discovered the channel. And it's happy to have you here. Oh, Sean's watching, so hey, Sean. He's in Kaysen's Discord. So, and then critique over your original room layout. I think this was I'm proud of you for doing this. That's all I've got to say really. Is
Thanks.
um, you went above and beyond and played with this. I like that you had one room, decided that was a little too basic, and you started looking into how to break it up. So going through that iterative process is a key factor of successful design. And then following that extrusion and filling it up with things of note and how you could use that. And so you're using it as inspiration and a guideline for making your own sets. In terms of the final piece, I think this could work because of the chair here. The way that it's positioned again makes me think that it's trying to look at something that is off the canvas that we can't see. And I would either want that to be extended out some so that there's a balance and we can see what it's looking at. So now we have this full desk command center and each chair is looking at a point of interest. Or I might think, let's change this chair to be pointed this direction so that it's pointed away from us a little more, and then we add stuff of interest down here, the stuff that we need to see. Maybe it's tiny little guys and they've got their airplane sticks and
Oh yeah.
they're guiding a crane. Then might just add a little bit of interest, so make this not look like it's the part that doesn't matter, because with the way that you want to set this up is to bring people in, so it is what matters. It doesn't deserve the same detail though as what you can put on this scene. So looking in, I think it's great that you got this stuff. Like, I just noticed that. I just noticed this. I noticed that you are playing with and figuring out those geometric cuts that I showed you a couple weeks ago, that's awesome. That's awesome work. So
Yeah, and those are based off assets as well. So I've had those beams are all assets as well, and I've cut into them afterwards.
sweet. That's it. That's it. That's getting it done. So
Yeah.
a couple other things would be like you've got these cables here. That's awesome. Maybe we have cables that run between them, and then you've got the mounts for your televisions or your screens. I would want, maybe let's go with like an airplane style control center and a mixer board as inspiration for. So like, you know how a DJ has a big mixer board in the studio with a bunch of levers. So
Yeah.
that would be something as inspiration, a bunch of bleepity bloops and pads. Do the same here. You can make an asset out of it and then just change things up between them. This one has a bunch of switches and buttons that you'd see in an airplane, some levers, some stuff that, you know, comes out into the XYZ.
Yeah.
And so by adding all this detail, you can, maybe there's some papers, so you get a sense that it's like people do live here. They've got a pencil, they've got a cup, and so you get a sense of the people that are working there. And then because there's more stuff in focus here, we're not drawn to looking there, where admittedly there is more stuff and detail. Like you got the panel here, and this chair makes me think that we want to look in that direction. So that's how I would go about adjusting that to reposition in a way for if you just wanted to edit that without, or you could extend it. I'm sorry, but
Yeah. Extending it would probably be better. Like, I think you're right.
yeah, that was always such a weird concept that I heard from Kason in class, that every image that I did, he was like, I would zoom out. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean zoom out?
Right.
And he's like, yeah, man, just grab that image you did. And now I get it. That he's like, I don't see enough of the entire space. If you zoom out, and actually, let's copy this first. So,
Because it's almost a bit too heavy on the right as well with
whoops.
the quite thick pillar.
Right. So compositionally, it just feels like it ends rather than you getting the full scene. So I'll draw it on top. Hey guys on YouTube, happy for you to be here. As I stream, it's not convenient, I know, but I stream at 8 a.m. on Wednesdays for these lessons. And if you want, I'll change the description on the stream later, but you can find my Discord links in past videos. You can join the Discord community, and I'll tag you for when I'm going on stream, so you can participate like Alex is doing with me now. We have, after this week, there will be 4 more weeks in the environment sketching course, and I'll be really busy after that point, so I don't know if I'll do environment painting like I thought I would, but for the time being, we'll keep doing this for another month. Okay, so if I just zoom out and maybe I position that so that it is in this top third, you could have this whole desk come into play with more of that pillar, and then let's see, you get more of the space as a whole. Let's put another box in this foreground, and then we'll have like some sort of thing that leads up to here. Add some of those cables. They come up and creep up this chair. Why not? It's dirty. It's dirty sci-fi. Those cables can lead, and then yeah, that way you get more of space, and you get more of those leading lines, those natural room lines that guide the eye to the cockpit here. Then your chair that is positioned this way doesn't feel as weird either if you have all this space So you could leave this as is, but just add on to make that full composition. Okay, Alex. Cool. That's all I got.
Yeah, thanks,
buddy.
Alex.
It's fun talking to the same person.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. Let me check the temperature outside. My dogs have been out for a while. I'm going to bring him in. Excuse me, and I've got one more person to do feedback on, and we'll be done. Okay. So the other person who submitted is Matthias, and unfortunately he couldn't make it today because of scheduling issues that I had. But again, just reiterating what the assignment was, it was to start with a prop and try to redesign it and push its proportions, and then as an exercise in prop design, as well as creating cinematic interior spaces. So he really went all out with trying to make some detailed ones, which is cool. Good job, Matthias. So let's talk about our props first. So I believe, okay, we got original here. And then that leads to iterations, which led to pushing further. I'm not sure what style he used as a base, but I'll just judge on what I can find. I think overall it's successful. Like from a silhouette, I see rectangle, I see counterbalanced oval, and this is good to play into what I was mentioning earlier, which is one side simple, one side complex. So there's that simple bold statement and then the interesting stuff on top. So that works well. I would say that just with this one, this is equal size enough that I think it feels like a 60-40, but it's not clear enough that I would encourage either stretching this up just a tad, maybe going extra tall would be interesting. So tall and squat, or really short, and then you just got this tiny like little plant that comes out of it for this massive bowl. I think it'd be stupid, but it'd be funny. So yeah, that's my only thing there. I think good job, Matthias, on the actual pushing themselves and playing with it. Pushing further, I see that now you're experimenting with that broken line style that we talked about in class last week. And I like that you took the pattern idea and started playing with manipulating that around, putting it elsewhere, and changing the shape itself. Let's see. If I'm just looking at proportions, I'm just assessing them for myself, seeing if what I'm seeing is true or not. I think this relationship here is fine. What I'd be interested in is pushing that one more. So if we don't want to have 50-50 within the 40 group, right? So this is split half and half. Let's pull this down. So that there's that. So now this is a 70-30 within the 40 group. And then you've got your 60 up here, and that's a nice proportional split. So good. I can see you balancing it all. It's difficult to juggle, but once you start seeing the proportions like this, once you start measuring them out, like that's a very effective analytical method for me to assess design. I like this is that animation style of bigger on the top, wonky on the bottom. It looks like things can fall over at any moment. That is a very common design aesthetic. So I'd say this is successful. This is good exploration, and if you had one that you enjoyed, I particularly like that one. I'd say good job. That's a good exercise. All right. Okay, so what we talked about in previous sessions, Matthias, was texture density or asset density, which I think is okay. I think, like, I'm seeing that you're starting to cut and add additional geometry rather than going with flat asset surfaces. I will mention again Jordan Tuffin and his mention. Let's pull it up for new viewers. Jordan Tuffin has a, what is it? Let's just pull it up larger. He has a post about, okay, line work on a large scene. And this is approaching line work with complexity and scale. And he talks about how in the foreground you have really prominent density, a lot of lines, a lot of detail expressing what you're looking at. But in the top row, he shows as things get farther away, there's more focus on silhouette. So lots of detail in the foreground. As things go farther away, it's more just major shapes rather than small details. And you can approach that in this method of starting with a silhouette, then secondary details, then smaller tertiary details, which starts to build up that density, and then texture. So I think the disconnect that's happening for me is we've got texture of these small lines way back with these small people. And not that they shouldn't be there, because they are describing the scene as a whole. I think it's we might need some extra scale or things to break it up again. So I'm gonna make this darker. This can get here, this can be here. So that's another pattern, and then that allows us to eliminate this texture. Just the amount of them and the detail of them. Like I appreciate that these are lighter in line weight than last week, so that's good. I'm just trying to figure out why it feels like it's unbalanced. Maybe it's in the progression of the line weight. So if I press these back some with an airbrush, does it feel more natural? I think that may just be it. It may just be the line weight being uniform from foreground to background. You can continue to push that by doubling up and thickening some of the textures in the foreground. So even though it's been placed down, that's not where you don't want to just stop there. You want to make sure that you edit them just a little bit so that you can fit them into your scene properly. Okay, then let's say this is good. Like, we have a clear area to focus. I would maybe add one more level of density or detail to this. And then this one doesn't have to have, it doesn't have to mirror it. It can just be more of a wall. And then what you really want to focus on in a scene like this is going to be just exactly what is all this information up here. Because we're really up close and personal. This is a behind the shoulder style shot. Everything over here is grand in scale, smaller details, so you can get away with introducing just geometry and interesting parts of things. And you can get away with that, but once you're up here, you want to detail, like, is this a panel? Does this have a control point? You'll want to make these lines thinner. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but since they're closer to you, you can get finer detail design by making your line thinner, but then emphasizing the silhouette with a thicker line, right? So where it breaks apart to the foreground is where you can get that emphasis. But all of the small details, you want to have that overlap, maybe a couple lights there. And let's see if we can introduce like one more object here. Just something to show that there is a space that he is walking in. I think maybe if you lifted this up, and let's see. That way it feels more like a window. And talking about grayscale, just a simple solution is this. Makes it look like glass. It's really simple, but yeah. So that way it feels like he's looking into a scene. And let's see. Okay, so I do see that like you thickened your lines of your character, and then you went small and descriptive here. So that's appropriate. I think that works. You might have them a little bit thinner, unless you're going for like a really expressive inking style. And then let's see, just stuff that can show depth, because this wall is feeling flat, and I want this to come out some, have some sense of more things. Just some three-dimensional overlap there. Yeah, that's what I got. That's what I got. Good job. And last one. Maybe I'll turn this way. Okay. I'll expand this. I don't know if it can get any larger, but so that you guys can see. Okay. If we are to assess what's going on here, I really like this one. I think this one is very successful. Reasons why is, from at a glance, I can immediately see that we've got a circular compositional point. I see that you're working with the basic shapes and group arrangement that we have talked about before. I see that we've got our circle and our subject lives within it. I see that our corners have been walled off. They're not dead ends. In fact, they provide depth for us, giving us a sense of the scale and the direction of those objects. It's very dynamic. You've got the Dutch angle going on with the tilt, so I'd say good job on all of it. In terms of, let's see, anything else that you would put in for a line drawing? because it can often be a balance of, am I going to detail out every single thing for a drawing, or do I just want to paint it? And I think the stopping point would be secondary geometry. So again, that's connection points, transition points. The only reason I would say that the line work doesn't feel finished is just because of things like this back here and then it ending. It just ends there, right? We want to address this. We want to have a panel that goes up. This shows that that is a more realized. I'm not going to do it every single one. I'm going to do it every other one. And then this one would be a panel, vent, you don't need to go crazy with the details. Like, don't detail anything out more than this. Don't go in there with assets unless the asset would help you, but don't make the asset any more informationally dense than what I've demonstrated here. You can get your perfect fan shape because again, talking about that texture amount as you go back in a scene, the main goal is just to introduce that additional transitions between things. So maybe there's a connector there, and there's a connector here, and a second box for whatever reason, and down here you've got another barrel with its own things that hold it up, and it's got a pipe. Bonus points for bringing that pipe behind him, getting that depth. Having this one come up as well. A logo. Logos are always interesting. And then you can do the same thing here. So now you've got extra stuff that lives in this blank space between your circle just give it that extra little bit of detail and the occasional panel. So this is sci-fi, so it'll actually be kind of perfect rather than proportional panels. You might link them together through some stuff. And then let's see. Yeah, that's the sort of idea, just breaking these corners. What can go here that would break that corner and soften it? What can you do here to make that just slightly more interesting without taking away attention? Add a cap to this. That'll make that feel thought through. And lastly is just getting your important character and your foreground to read against backgrounds. So I don't need you to light it or anything, not in this case because it was a simple grayscale and we didn't actually go over how to do that any more advanced. But I just marked it in with a multiply layer and now let's darken that up. Let's do the same here. That way he just reads in the room. I think the sort of setup you have with the lighting here is good, and I am a fan. So that's what I got for you, Matthias. I think great job. The rest is how to push it that extra level before you would call this done, unless for a cleaned up line work pass. And that was all of the submissions for the week. Okay. Good job, Alex. Good job, Matthias. And for anyone who's still watching on YouTube, here is the homework again. The homework is 10 low-level cutaways, just establishing the geometry. The second part is take 10 of those cutaways and give them to a mid-level loose finish of set dressing. Just adding in furniture, adding in basic things, but you don't have to go crazy. And then take your favorite one of those three and try to bring it to as high a level of finish as possible, complete with storytelling and grayscale. So this is an example. Some of the stuff that you have to be wary of is density of information. And that is, if you use a floor asset like I did here, is it going to feel out of place? It might if you only present the line drawing, at which point you're going to want to figure out how to either juggle the density of the detail, so maybe press some of it back with an airbrush by erasing it, or having less texture and fading out and erasing some of the hard lines, because you can do that. Or decide that when you take it into grayscale as a painting that it's going to be a light detail finish, but it's not going to take up all of that dark contrast. So it's a balance, and I'd say that it works in this case, having all that wood. One, because when I took it to color, it wasn't as noticeable. And two, the other assets are also very high detail and light in line weight. So thin lines and light value, sorry. Before I go, Purple Hills is asking if I used a 3D base for that drawing. I did not. So you can, once the live stream is finished, you can rewind for this lesson and see how I approach creating layouts like this. But it's very easy to create something this accurate without 3D, thankfully. And I'll just demonstrate one more time about all of the lines that were in those wood panels were colored and set back to be reduced in contrast, so that way it sets in really well with the painting. If this were in grayscale, let's just explore that. All of the lines that were present before, they don't vibrate as much as they do here. And this was not my finished product. This is not what I wanted to present as the final. If I were going to present a finished line drawing, I would have approached my line weight and approached to the density differently. But knowing that I wanted to go into it with a full render painting and I wanted every line to act as detail is why I did that. So then I could then set them within value that held the structure. It gave your eye something to latch onto. Then all of those assets were just supporting details. Okay, so I'll just end the stream on the homework page and I will say goodbye to you all. So appreciate you hanging out for this long. And
thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thanks so much, and we'll do this again next week. Oh, tomorrow, Thursday, January 13th, I will be doing my digital sketchbook tour. So that'll be fun. That'll be commemorative in honor of my 3-year anniversary of being an artist. So if you guys want to hang out, I'll ping you again. And enjoy the rest of your day or your night. So bye, guys.
See ya.